and it's unfortunate, but when you get parents talking about the all-star, the kid is going to be hearing all the things that they're not with regards to that all-star that the parent is talking about, or about how they did it in their day, or about just comparisons. And then the kid takes that on and says, well, that's what my parents are doing. That's what sports as a society is doing. Well, that's what I should do. So that's what's important to me, right? So I'm going to compare myself to the all-star. I'm going to compare myself to the girl next door, the guy next door, right? I'm going to compare my stats, my outcomes, my work ethic, my effort, my whatever it might be, to everybody else. And they fall victim. And I'm going to say that as a fact, like they fall victim to that trap.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. And whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest is a mental performance coach of elite teen athletes and their parents. He hosts his own podcast called The Kick. Go check it out. It is linked up here as well. And I could go on and on, but I really want to get into this episode. So please welcome to the Elevate podcast, Nate Last.
It's a good day. Just got off with a client of my own as well today, and you're enjoying life when you can wake up early, you can get your workout in, and you're invigorated by the first call of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we're excited to have you. Like you said, we've been trying to connect for this for a little bit, but like we were talking about schools and sports and the people we work with, man, schedules are busy. And well, I want to usually start off with getting the guests to tell the audience a little bit about themselves. Let's talk about those schedules off the bat, though. We were talking about that, the workload, the mental, emotional, physical, all the things that on student athletes, high school and college these days. What do you observe? What do you hear? What shocks you? And what do you try to do about it?
What shocks me is I see these kids go 110 miles an hour, 7 days straight, expected by their parents, their teachers, their coaches to be there and bring 100% of themselves at all times of the day, and then collapse for days or weeks at a time when it comes to their mentality, their general wellness, their mental wellness, and their bodies are forcing them to rest, right? They get sick, really sick, and it's sad. It's just like, gosh, like to start developing, and this is kind of what I do about it. When I see these kids go that hard, one of my protocols inside of what I do in performance psychology and inside of the coaching that I do is deliberate rest days, right? And I want you to rest as hard as you possibly can. And I want you to do all the things that entail good, helpful, insightful rest, right? In order to get them in a place where they feel like they have a foundation that is not just overwhelm, that it's not just overclock, I guess you could say, when it comes to their daily habits. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing, and it's unfortunate, but it's a reality they're facing. And to do something deliberate to help them, rest, relax, take a day for themselves, or at least a few hours, and get some freaking sleep, is important.
Yeah, no doubt. The student athlete, the teenager, is one of the things I was super excited to have you on this podcast. I think that's one of our mutual passions. I have a lot of guests that, work in college and pro space on mental skills and performance. But for me, I was just, man, I think that schedule and the different environment that kids bring up. But what drew you to have such a passion to work with the student athlete?
Well, that gets into a little bit of my story, but effectively, I was the kid who quit.
Get into
I
that story,
was
Nate.
I was a phenom, man. I was given a set of golf clubs when I was 5 years old, and I wore the grips and the grooves off those clubs by the time I was 8. And I love the game. It was absolutely my solace. My mom and dad, they had the family business to take care of, and they were working 9 to 5, 9 to 6 most days, Monday through Saturday. And so I was left to kind of do my own thing and kind of, create my own life. And when I was, under 10, under 11, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to swim, I wanted to sit in the sun, and I wanted to golf. Maybe some bike riding in there as well. The family did motocross back in the day. And so that was my life. It was very much adventuring and getting out and playing golf. And essentially I got into 10, 11, 12 years old, hit puberty early, grew a beard, which I was very proud about at that point in time as well. And along with the beard came some serious mental things that were occurring, some new capacities, new things that were occurring that I had no idea what to do with, right? I started doing a lot of social comparison and started feeling bad about the fact that I wasn't, playing as well as I should be playing and all of these expectations that I was perceiving in my life, like and it turned this game that I was playing from my solace and my dream to absolute hell.
Mm,
And it was no fun for me anymore. And I didn't want to play because there was too much pressure, too much angst. And it wasn't like it was coming from anybody but myself. That was the problem, right? I started getting super critical every day of whether or not I was productive or getting something out of the day, or learned anything new. And so essentially I got into 15 years old after kind of struggling with it for 4 or 5 years. It was my sophomore year in high school. We went to the high school state tournament. And it's after 6 holes, I ended up walking off the course and I never played again.
mm,
Uh, I didn't talk to my coach. I didn't talk to any of my teammates. Uh, and I still have yet to talk
mm,
to anybody from that team. And I let them down. And I let myself down in that moment. I was 6 over after 3 holes, and I was like, screw this. I am done with this game. Like this
mm.
is so stupid. And I think it hurt a lot of the relationships that I had then. But I felt free. I felt free from the angst and the struggle and all of that. And then I
Yeah.
got into lacrosse because I was a natural born athlete. I love the athletic side of things. Physically, I was capable and got really good really fast, just like a normal or a natural talented athlete is. Like they get really good really fast, and then it got hard again.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as soon as it got hard, I started getting critical of
Mm,
myself. Ended up graduating high school as a captain, and then went university play at the University of Utah. And all the social comparisons came back up. Me leaning on my talents and not being coachable, and kind of came up, and my head game just sucked.
mm,
And lo and behold, I ended up falling out of lacrosse after 2 years at the university level, breaking bones and my body for a game. And realizing the whole time that it was my head, right? My head was getting in the way of my optimal performance, of my happiness, of my excitement, of my joy. um I was an engineer at that point, at the university, and I heard of a sports psychology consultant talking, and heard the conversation she had to say, and I said, that's it. That's if I only had that when I was a
yeah,
kid, what could
yeah,
I have done? So I went 7 years hard into getting my master's degree in applied performance psychology. And all I wanted to do since graduating is find a way to make this stuff accessible to teen athletes and their parents, to help them understand you can absolutely do something about that head game that comes into play when puberty hits.
yeah.
And it's been an absolute joy to be able to serve in that manner, for the last decade now. Goodness. So
For sure. I think that's one of
that was a story. Goodness.
that's
Sorry
good.
to
I
monologue
I
there.
wanted that. I want to know. I love it. I think let's talk about some of that. I think too, because I think that's one of, like I said, big passions is, bringing this uh to more student athletes. And I think I've done some work, you probably experienced this too, where you talk to a group, on a weeknight or a weekend, and someone comes up to you and they're like, man, this is good stuff. They should teach this in schools. Right. And then you're just like, I had that. And I was like, well, what do you do? I'm like, I'm the principal. I'm like, sounds like you run the school. And like, it's like, all right, like, why aren't we bringing this in, outsider curriculum combination, all the above, when we're recognizing the overwhelming that it can help. The other thing I think that you see a lot, and you brought it up with your own story in dealing it with your clients, is that comparison trap,
Mm,
and kids,
nasty.
you know, what tends to lead people to it, and how can we help lead them out of that?
Well, this might piss some people off. So please forgive me, parents, if you're offended. I number one, I want to say this though. Parents, thank you. And I want to get deliberate here. If you're a parent out there, I want to recognize your positive intent as a parent. Parenting is very hard. It's very, very, very hard. And I want to recognize all parents for their role and their effort in working with their children and doing their absolute best with what they have where they're at. Because I know y'all are doing it. So I want to say that right off the bat. And I think the comparisons trap is started number one in the news and in ESPN, and the only thing that you ever see the TV talking about is how one person compares to another. And they've got the stats up there at all times. That's everything. The only thing everybody wants to talk about is the stats, right? And how does this person compare to this person? And how does that person compare to that person? And and then they go back in history and then compare across time, and it's unfortunate and it's sad. And I think then that leads the parents to start talking about comparison, because that's what the news is doing. That's what the TV, that's what sports as a society is doing. And it's unfortunate, but when you get parents talking about the all-star, the kid is going to be hearing all the things that they're not with regards to that all-star that the parent is talking about,
Yeah.
or about how they did it in their day, or about just comparisons. And then the kid takes that on and says, well, that's what my parents are doing. That's what sports as a society is doing. Well, that's what I should do. So that's what's important to me, right? So I'm going to compare myself to the all-star. I'm going to compare myself to the girl next door, the guy next door, right? I'm going to compare my stats, my outcomes, my work ethic, my effort, my whatever it might be to everybody else. And they fall victim. And I'm going to say that as a fact, like they fall victim to that trap. And it is a trap because
I've been there.
they think it's important, but it's not. And we can speak about that here in just a second. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I think yeah, everything is ranked, early on, and that's just come into, uh, you know, earlier and earlier stages of evaluations and tryouts in sports that we've seen. And I can't remember which of the Scandinavian countries, or if it's more than one of them, but they're obviously very successful in the Winter Olympics, and uh, maybe it is Norway or Sweden, but they don't allow kids measurements or standings until they're like 12 years old.
Mm,
So they just let them go, and they don't like measures, and they just pure fun. And that's the youth program, that produces some of the best, Winter Olympic athletes. And so it's they've kind of had to remove by choice some things in the system that would make that a little bit better for the well-being and development of the ones that become athletes and the ones that become the people that they already are. And so I think it's hard. I'm glad I didn't have social media,
hmm,
because I think that was is just a layer, because then you just see, again, like you said, the rankings, the standings, the stats, good or bad. Um, I had a coach come up to me after a clinic about a month ago, and said they had an athlete that wanted to be on the team, so wrestling, and he also coached different sports, so he was there for something else. But he had a athlete wanted to wrestle on the wrestling team, but did not want to compete in the meet because he did not want others to put a video of social media of him wrestling online. That was his greatest fear. I'll go compete and do all the hard wrestling stuff, but I don't want to get caught up in some social media. And I was like, he's like, how do I? He goes, and we were eventually able to help him, like kind of, but he's like that as a coach, he was navigating something very new that was this. He won't compete because a camera of something that he doesn't know about. And so,
Mm-hmm.
in effort to help coaches and parents too, it's kind of eye opening. Um, that it wasn't a fear of losing out there. It was a fear of
Ridicule.
commentary. Yeah.
Yep. And
And
and that's the things that our kids have to deal with. Um, I just want to say one thing to that kid. If that kid can listen to me right now and say, "I'm proud of you. I am proud of you for wanting to like not compete, but to play sport,
yeah,
to train, to be an athlete." Like I'm so proud to hear that that kid just wants to be an athlete. They don't want everything else. They don't want the adulation. They don't want the high fives and the claps. They want to work and they want to feel good about themselves. And they want to, and they want all that stuff that sport gives them that competition takes away, right? Um, and I get it. We're a competitive society. We are human beings, right? And we we always will be. We're always looking for power. And if only our kids would do it for the reason that that kid just wants to wrestle,
yeah,
because he just wants to be an athlete and
yeah,
get everything that athletics gives them. That's the good stuff.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah. That was beautiful. Um, when you talk about when you find Nate stuff, you see mental grit. Um, One of those things that I think, obviously the book Grit, Angela,
Duckworth, yeah.
yeah, eh, people grab that and then they know what grit is, right? But talk about how you help define and shape and develop that ideal of grit and why it's important.
Well, grit, I mean, if you go to the book, Duckworth, Angela Duckworth, she's in the field of performance psychology. She's much more of a research oriented individual, and I praise her work because it's great work. She found this concept of passion plus perseverance over time equals grit, right? Or passion plus perseverance equals grit. And I remember that book was coming out just after I graduated from my programming, and to see something so clearly defined, and then to see the research to that points to success measures, right? And I guess it gets back to measuring, right? But by measuring passion and time inside of a sport or inside of an activity, even though that's hard, you can see what that kid is going to become in the future, right? You can, like, if they have that gritty factor, their success rates in life, whether that be in career or in family or in sport or in just doing really, really difficult things throughout their life, that goes way up, right? And you can see it as a kid. Um, there's a lot of great application from all of that research. But when it comes to the work that I do with these kids, the only way that we can achieve this idea of perseverance is to teach them skills that will enable them to persevere, right? Like
Yeah.
you have this concept of well, if grit is passion plus perseverance, that's joy and engagement over a long time, right? If those are the two factors we're trying to influence in order to keep them involved in doing hard things, then I need to be able to teach them, number one, how not to get on their own. I'm going to say back right now, but I'm meaning something else. Um, I need to teach them how to back themselves up rather than being, jerks to them themselves. I need to help them understand how to manage and control things like their focus and attention, things like their emotional response to and activation levels to chaos, things like how to talk to yourself rather than listening to yourself, how to control the images that we create in our mind, of the events that play out in our life, how to get ready and decompress from high pressure situations, right? Just like we do as adults in life, like priming and pre-performance routines are a big deal. And if you're not doing it, you should be, because there's a lot to be left on the table there, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, the way that I like to work with my clients is enable them with skills that they might not know that they have, or at least they don't know that they have control over,
Yeah.
until you start teaching the little tactics, little techniques on, okay, yeah, talk to yourself. Don't listen to yourself, because what you're saying in your head, that's not you.
Yeah.
That's your biology literally telling you that you shouldn't be doing this because you're putting yourself at risk. That we are living in a world now where everything's pretty safe outside of social media at this point.
Yeah.
But in terms of like physical risk, we're not really in danger at this point. And the fact that our minds are trying to keep us from taking those risks to help us, feel safe and to help us survive, to say the least. Competition isn't about survival. Competition and performance isn't about like not losing. Competition and performance is about achievement and winning. And so to get these athletes to start doing things in their minds to seek achievement rather than avoid failure, those are the little tactics that will make a difference in their passion, excitement, joy of the sport, because now they don't have that a hole in their head criticizing themselves. And then the perseverance part, now they have the capacity and the skill set to persevere, to achieve.
Yeah.
And so if you put those two things together, you get mental grit. And that's what I hope to instill in every athlete I work with, to not only impact them in sports, which is great because kids love sports and they are willing to put the work into
Yep.
sports in some cases. Some athletes are great with just academics. Awesome. They care about academics. Go for it. I wasn't that kid, right? I needed sport to teach me. Unfortunately, I didn't have a sports psychology consultant or a mental performance trainer, right?
Yeah.
But the whole point being is that, yeah, like having them learn this in sport so they can then apply it to life, because challenges, no matter what they are going to involve the head, whether that's in sport or in school or in life. So,
And like tell you early on in there, you talked about, so I think a lot of coaches, whether, the grit, toughness, persevere, like, how do we get these kids to do more of it? And they just kind of, they're looking at those things. And it's, like you said, no, it's a variance, an aggregation of different skills that are going to create that ability to persevere over time, to not be discouraged, to keep giving that effort. So I like how, give it, it's a lot of things to be persevering wholeheartedly, right? Um, and so I like that part of it. And then the other thing I was going to tell you, and wanted to kind of hear, um, is when you do still meet coaches, administrators that have a misunderstanding or hesitation of how this can help performance. What do you say to people that are maybe suspect of, is this good use of our time? And I like that you laugh.
I, it's, uh,
Uh,
I don't even know how to respond. I have never in my life, I've never heard a coach say, "Is that worth our time?" If they're asking that question, then they should not be coaching, because they do not get it. They don't get the light. They don't get. They've never been there. If they're saying that, they've never played the head games. I mean, and this is why I laugh. They're dealing with, man, unless they're like completely negligent and are just like I don't even want to look at my problems.
right.
because every human, this is not a sport thing, this is a human thing, and every human deals with this stuff. So as soon as I say like stop being an a-hole to yourself, like you can be like, yeah, you're right, I am critical sometimes. I probably shouldn't be on my own back as much as I am. I guess those coaches or those individuals who are saying it's not worth our time, they've just put their emotions and their mind and their thinking in a box so deep that they can't even see it anymore. Like, and that's kind of harsh to say, but I've never met a parent, an athlete, a coach who, when I explain like mental performance and mental skill, they don't go like, yep, yep. That's because it's just a human reality. It's something, it's just never been, and I think this is the struggle for me. Like, it's never been taught in a way that's like approachable. It's always
Yeah.
been all this like woo psychology stuff that's like, let's go breathe through our eyeballs. And it's
Or
like,
it's only for problems, right?
oh
You
yeah, yeah.
you
And,
know,
and then you
oh,
then
I
you get to
feel
like this whole like, oh, we're gonna go fix them. They've got a problem. Like, oh, I don't want to swear. I apologize.
it's
This is
okay.
the
This it's
athlete coming into
yeah.
me. But
We allow it.
it's BS that in today's world that we're still sitting here, and if you look at mental health as a whole, right? You got a spectrum of mental health. Mental health is on the left hand side, you see like the surviving, the clinical issues that are occurring in mental health. And this is like your bipolar disorder and your ADHD and your bulimia and just disorder in the mind, right? There's a very much a surviving component to this one, and this is where all the world is putting their attention because it's, again, that avoidance mindset, keeping people from killing themselves, which is extremely important to humans. Awesome. I'm really happy that we're putting a stop sign there and saying, hey, we need to do a lot about this. And
Yeah.
we are. Then, though, we have this middle section and this right section that is grit and toughness, right? And flow and performance. And that second two-thirds of this spectrum doesn't get any attention whatsoever, even though we're all facing it every single day. We all know what it likes, like this up and down feeling of everything is hard and I'm a little depressed today. I feel a little off today. I don't feel great
Yeah.
today. I am mentally I am struggling. Well, if we can just see that that's an opportunity and say, okay, like let's help these individuals develop the skills they need to keep moving right, to keep moving into performance, to keep moving back, even though they have the challenges.
Yeah.
Like that's what's exciting to me. So yeah, this like the society needs to pull their head out of their butt, thinking that it's all about continuing to fix problems. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about optimizing potential. Get out of the avoidance mindset of like, I don't want people to die, and get into the achievement mindset and said, I want people to live.
Yeah. It's another one of our guests that we had on not too long ago. He's talking about an example where a big city and a head of a administrative superintendent of a school district, and he talked about all those problems that you talked about, those disorders, and about all the money that the school district was putting towards that. And then tough question, has it made any difference? And she's like, no. It's like very minimal. And he's like, is that nationwide in cities like yours? Yeah. Yeah. But it's that very like reactive
Mm.
versus proactive, bring it into the important development of these skills and how they are just amplifiers of I think humanness, and
Mm.
then that'll amplify any performance or achievement you want to work towards.
Yeah, it'll give them the opportunity to go after something instead of not fall into something, right?
Yeah.
I'll say it this way. I have a kid. He's 7 years old. He's in the public school system, and we went to parent teacher conference the other night, and she said he's excelling. He's excelling in every and everything in his math, in his reading. He is leaps and bounds beyond anybody else. He's already completed like whatever school, like I don't remember what it's called, but he's completed the highest level of this reading program that we have him go. And I said, great, what's next? And she says, well, we're going to repeat what he's done. And I said, well, why? Like, why not give him the level 13 and level 14 and level 15? And she says, I can't. And I said, what do you mean you can't? Well, the next grade teacher doesn't want us to have them be ahead of everybody else. And I got to thinking about that and I went, the reason for these parent teacher conferences, or at least this is the feeling that I got, right? As a parent, is they want to make sure that the 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 kids who are struggling keep up, and they have no care in the world for the kids who are thriving,
Yeah.
to keep pushing, to keep pursuing. And I was like, I talked to the teacher and I said, do you know how self-determined this kid is right now to learn? Do you know how plastic my child is right now to bring in knowledge? Do you have any idea? And she looked at me and she says, I do. And my hands are tied. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
damn. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry that, like, it's like, I know she sees it. I know she cares. And I know she's just as frustrated as I am, because the system is essentially all about making sure that, the lowest is keeping up,
Yeah.
rather than, again, that whole avoidance mindset versus achievement mindset. It's a very different philosophy. It's a very different, I guess you could say, mental mindscape, navigation beacon to even shift your attention to. But once
Yeah.
you do, like, you start seeing some nuances there that are very, very important,
There's
for achievement.
I was reading this book on self-esteem, and then when it talks about education, the author talks about uh, one of the greatest challenges is a hardworking, shy student, because they usually get the least amount of attention from their teachers. They're performing well, they're not acting out, and their attention has to go towards the kids that aren't performing well or tend to act out.
You're right. And I wish it was different. And I also acknowledge the challenge that is scale, and that is running a country, and that is systems, and that is governments, and that is, and okay, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think those are all things you have to acknowledge. It is very, very difficult to take human beings from good to great if they don't want it themselves. And so, yeah, you do have to focus on keeping people from hurting themselves, and keeping the kids who are not getting there, keeping them from falling, into nothingness, and to,
Mm.
not being
Uh,
contributing member to society, or whatever you want to call it. But
Do
but
you
yeah, that
think
I mean, that's why, though, I focus on that performance aspect, because there are those kids that do want and
I,
have the capacity to get what's next.
just
So
like you? I mean, my mom was a teacher and coach in city schools, and you know, under-resourced, overwhelmed,
mhm.
underpaid, all those things. And teachers are amazing. Get blessed to meet so many that do so much with so little resources for so many. Um, but I was going to ask you, in teachers that find themselves in that situation or have, maybe a student like yours, are we losing the opportunity sometimes? Okay, maybe I can't, my hands are a little tied with getting the resources of 13, 14, 15 for your son.
Yeah.
But leading other kids in the class and helping bring them up, there's sometimes that dynamic of how do we put leadership, the focus beyond our growth, and balance that where the kid's getting the right amount of challenge and someone with greater capacity within their peer group can help lead them. I know that's way easier said than done. But I'd love to see our education system find more opportunities for peer-to-peer growth and development sometimes.
I think of what could happen if my son was given the opportunity to teach another. What
Yeah.
what what could happen if my kid, who loves to show me what he can do, could show another kid? Because in my opinion, the opportunity that we are failing on is growing confidence in these kids when the when the oppor- when these kids find that they can do something and then they're not challenged, then they just fill them the rest of that space with social media and with TV, right? Like
Yeah.
I think all teachers and praise them for the work that they do because just like parents, they're doing the best they can with what they have where they're at.
Yeah.
If I mean I don't know, I'm not very written in on everything that happens within schools and the politics that are involved and the powers that be, but I do know that if you can build a kid's confidence through action in any way, shape, or form, you should be leaning really, really, really hard into that opportunity because this life is stupid hard, stupid hard. And the only way that these kids will be able to, in my opinion, not only survive but thrive is that they are so self-confident in their knowledge and their experiences that they're going to be able to face the a-holes on YouTube who took their wrestling match and made it a spoof.
Yeah.
They're going to be able to be like, man, I'm sorry for that kid because he might not have the love that I had. And I you're right, like
Yeah.
they're so confident in themselves that say, they can do that to me and it doesn't hurt me.
How can we as adults do better? I tend to see a lot of adults ignore their own things, and that, impedes their ability to recognize and build those things in children. Um, but how can we, I guess, in kids' terms, be real with them and authentic? Because the tendency when you talk to teenagers seems to be is that they think all of us adults got it going on and got it together, and then that they're supposed to figure it out and figure it out fast because we've got it figured out. Um, that's so not true. But how do we help lead authentically to help kids understand we have we all have struggles. They're different, but that we can connect and learn through each other.
In my opinion, you can't lead others unless you're leading yourself. And and I get it. I get how hard this is because I've had to do this work myself for a very long time. But leading yourself means knowing yourself and
Mhm.
acknowledging your realities and acknowledging your downfalls and seeing, I mean, in my opinion, there's a lot of adults out there who aren't willing to look inside, who aren't willing to
Big
see
time.
their faults, who aren't willing to see their 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 struggles, their downfalls, their pitfalls,
Things out of their control that
their
influence them.
tragedies. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but unless you're willing to lead yourself and know yourself and look inwards and be authentic with you, and this is the age old, everybody has heard this crap, right? Like you got, and I'm spouting platitudes at this point and I don't want to. Like I'm tired of hearing that. And I know that's like the only answer at this point. It's like you have to know yourself in order to know and lead others. In order to do that, you have to dig up your crap and you have to dig up your trauma and you have to get real with you. Like, and the only way to do that is to find others who give you that psychological safety to bring that out in that space. So there is a social impact there. And I think that's where you get into like some of these leadership or dev groups that are out there that enable opportunities for people to look inwards and to get better with themselves. And then by being good with themselves, they're able to be authentic with others, right? I just don't, and this is the grit part of life. I think this is another grit aspect is to be gritty enough to see you for who you are, wherever you're at, whenever you're at, acknowledge that, accept it without judgment, which is one of the hardest things in the world, and then moving forward and not holding on to that baggage, right? And pursuing that clarity that comes with knowing yourself. Um, God, that was a lot of platitude there. I don't know if I answered that in a way that was appropriate at this
Is
point, but
it was appropriate. It
help
was
help me out here. What am I trying to say?
I think it was well said. I think, I too, yeah, have experienced. I think even when you think you've done some of that or understood that, sometimes there's that work's never done when you're a human being. Um, there's a level I think yeah. And I think it's hard when you do some of that work as an adult to have a teen do it, right? Like they're just, they're still, it's a different navigation, different point on the path. Um, but the earlier we can understand ourselves and begin, it makes, you know, all the path just that much easier when we get further down it. But when we
I got a better answer, I think.
give it to me, Nate,
Okay, all right. Adults, if you want your kid to be able to validate their own emotions and what they feel and be able to deal with those emotions, you should be able to validate that for yourself.
way better.
Name it to tame
That's,
it, baby. Right?
yeah,
It's
name
like
it
it's
to
as
tame it.
simple as that.
Yeah.
Like if you want your kid to be emotionally stable, then the first way to do that is validate your own emotions and be like acknowledging and accepting of what you've got going on. Like
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sounds good.
And I think, yeah, the common thread is there when you ask people like, yeah, when I was able to do it to myself, I was way able to be of service to
Actually help
others.
other people. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
what if you taught a kid how to do that? Like teachers, there's the opportunity.
Yeah.
Validate the kid's emotions. Okay, now go do that for somebody else. Do you see Jenny over there? She's on the bench and she's crying. Can you go help her validate her own emotion? Can you do that?
Yeah.
And just be there with her? Can you do that? Yeah, because I just did that with myself because you helped me, teacher, do that for me. Like, thank you. Now I know what right looks like when it comes to dealing with the chaos of what emotions do to our body.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
holy crap, right?
Right. That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, the mind body connection. We're not going to get into that today.
For sure. We've already made this one longer, and I definitely want to have Nate back to talk some more. Because I know we got on some tangents. I only think I asked like three of my questions I wrote down. But it was
I'm long-winded. Please forgive me.
no, you hit on a couple of them too. It was great. But one of the things as we close this episode, I always like, and if they've been listening to this episode, they already heard your passion. But in your work uh, and what you get to do, what brings you the most joy?
Seeing these kids light up with I did it and I can. I had a kid the other day, 17-year-old swimmer. And the first session that I had with him, I was sitting down with him, his mom, and his coach. And I asked the kid, I said, tell me one thing that you are better at than any other swimmer in the pool that you're swimming in. And there was silence. And his mom started just shaking her head. And his coach was like shaking his head. And this kid was just like, I don't know. After about 4 weeks of working with this kid, I asked him that same question and he looks at me and he says, you know what, coach? He says, I am a monster with my kick. And my flip turns are faster than most anybody else out there. And I am so proud of myself. And I heard that and I was like, dude,
Yeah.
like 4 weeks ago, you hated swimming. You hated this sport. You were about ready to be done. And now you're telling me that you're a monster in the pool.
Yeah.
And I love what I do. And I'm proud of, and I'm like, what changed? He says, I started looking and I found something, but I couldn't find it unless I did look. And I was he was so wrapped up in comparisons and all of the where he should have been, could have been, would have been, all the what ifs, what if this happens, what if that happens. He was so tied up in everybody else. And he didn't have an opportunity. He was so tied up in comparisons and what everybody else had that he didn't give himself the time to look at what he had. And as soon as he did, state high school state championship or state, swim meet, and he freaking's dropping times and he's winning races and he's facing the challenges, same challenges that he used to face, right? He had a bad swim. Okay, he got up. Instead of blowing up and breaking down, the kid freaking got up and kept going. And then he dropped like 5 seconds in a ridiculously, like it was just ridiculous. And I don't know, you can hear the emotion a little bit, and
I
I'm
love
riled up over here, but that's my
it.
favorite part. That's why I
Yeah,
do what I do.
yeah. I love hearing stories like that because I think that's hearing stories like that fires me up too, man. That just having those shifts. Um, and yeah, I love if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it and feel it. That's why we want to have Nate back too, because I love having conversations like this. And I think for our listeners out there, understanding how much not just Nate and I's passion in this area, but so many of our guests that we have. And um, the thing I guess I close with today, Nate, um, you brought up action, and I know the way you do things, you make it interactive, fun. Um, but why, we just talked about joy, and you gave me a depth of joy in your answer there. But when it comes to you know what what you envision possible in this space, you talk about uh, getting these skills, mental skills, to more people. What do you dream of? What do you vision that would look like if you could wave a magic wand?
That would look like every sport program from East Coast to West Coast in the United States has an applied performance psychology consultant on staff supporting kids on deck, on the fields, in the thick of it, making sure that these kids have the skills that they need to take this experience that is sport and facilitate it into life goals, right? Into life achievements. They're 80% of graduating performance psychology consultants in America right now are falling out of the field within 5 years because they don't have a path to making financial or lucrative enough living to continue the effort. So there is a plethora of passionate individuals with the knowledge to build these kids up, ready and available, that don't have a way forward. And my dream would be to make sure that every kid has direct and instant access to a performance psych um, in America today. Like that's the dream. I'm gonna do my absolute darndest to develop a system, and that's what I've been working on. Is just how do I scale this? How do I get this to more kids? And that's where we're at now. And hopefully in the next year we'll be able to have 100 consultants working with mental grit with 1,000 athletes, and maybe the year after that it's 200 consultants with 3,000 athletes, right? But as long as these kids have access to it, and if they want it, if they want to learn more about the head game, if they want to learn more about what to do with it to help them perform, that they can, because that's what I didn't have. I didn't even have an option. And all I want to do is give the option.